My own daughter looked me in the eye and shouted, "You will either obey my husband or get out of this house." I did not raise my voice. I did not beg. I simply picked up my suitcase and walked away, leaving behind the very home I had built with my blood, sweat, and sacrifice. She thought I would crumble, but this time I was different. This time I had a plan. 1 week later, there were 22 missed calls on my phone, and that was only the beginning of their downfall. Because when you strip a father of his dignity, you awaken a strength you never expected. And soon they would learn exactly what justice feels like when it comes home. Have you ever been betrayed by the very family you gave everything for? What would you have done in my place? Before we go on, do not forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. We bring you new stories every day. Hit like and let us know what city you are watching from in the comments. My keys were still warm in my palm when I pushed through the front door, grocery bags cutting into my wrists. The Saturday afternoon light filtered through the living room curtains, casting everything in that soft spring glow that usually made me smile. Not today. Harry was sprawled in my leather recliner, Martha's last gift to me before the cancer took her. His stocking feet were propped up, a half-empty beer bottle dangling from his fingers. The remote control rested on his belly like he owned the place, which I suppose he thought he did, old man. He did not even look up from the basketball game. "Grab me another beer from the fridge while you are up." I set the grocery bags down, slowly feeling the weight of the milk cartons and bread loaves. The plastic handles had left red marks across my palms. "Excuse me, you heard me." Harry's eyes stayed fixed on the television screen. Corona. Not that cheap stuff you drink. Something cold settled in my chest. I had bought those Coronas specifically for him. Spent my social security money on beer I would never touch. "Harry, I just walked in. I need to put these groceries away." Now he looked at me. His face carried that familiar expression, the one that said I was being unreasonable difficult. "What is the big deal? You are already standing." "I am comfortable. The big deal is that this is my house." Harry's feet hit the floor with a thud. He stood slowly, using his height advantage like a weapon. At 30, he was bigger than me. Broader, but I had been dealing with difficult people long before he was born. "Your house. Funny, because your daughter and I live here. We pay the bills with my money." Details. He stepped closer, beer still in hand. "Look, Clark, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. You want to keep living here peacefully, you play ball. Simple as that." The kitchen door swung open. Tiffany appeared, her blonde hair pulled back in a messy ponytail dish towel in her hands. She took in the scene. Harry standing over me, the tension thick enough to choke on. "What is going on?" Her voice carried that warning tone I remembered from her teenage years. "Your father is being difficult," Harry said, without taking his eyes off me. "I asked him to get me a beer, and he is making it into some kind of federal case." Tiffany looked at me with disappointment, like I was a child acting out. "Dad, just get him the beer. It is not worth fighting over." But Harry was not done. He moved closer, close enough that I could smell the alcohol on his breath. "See, Clark, here is how it is going to work. You live in our house. You contribute. That means when I ask you to do something, you do it. No questions, no attitude. Our house." I kept my voice level, even though my heart was hammering. "That is right." Tiffany stepped beside her husband, presenting a united front. "Dad, you need to decide right now. Either you help Harry and do what he asks, or you can pack your things and leave." The words hung in the air like smoke. I looked at my daughter, searching for any hint of the little girl who used to climb into my lap during thunderstorms. She stared back with Harry's same entitled expression. "All right," I said quietly. Harry smirked, thinking he had won. "Good. Now about that beer. I will pack." The smirk died on his face. Tiffany's mouth fell open slightly, like she had expected me to crumble, to apologize, and shuffled to the kitchen like a beaten dog. I turned toward the hallway, leaving the grocery bags where they sat. Behind me, I heard Harry's sharp intake of breath. Tiffany whispered, "Dad, wait." But I was already walking towards my bedroom, my footsteps steady on the hardwood floor. Martha and I had refinished together 20 years ago. The suitcase came down from the closet shelf with a soft thump. I had bought it for our honeymoon to Yellowstone, back when Martha was still alive, and the future stretched ahead like an open road. Now it gaped empty on the bed, waiting to swallow what remained of my life in this house. I packed methodically. Underwear, socks, 3 changes of clothes. Not everything, just enough. From the living room came the low murmur of urgent whispers, Harry's voice, rising occasionally above Tiffany's softer tones. They were figuring out what to do, how to handle the old man's unexpected rebellion. My hands moved, without conscious thought, folding shirts and rolling ties. The photo of Martha went into the side pocket, wrapped in tissue paper. My medications, reading glasses, the small leather journal where I tracked expenses. When I wheeled the suitcase down the hallway, they stopped talking. Harry had returned to his chair, but his posture was different now, alert, watchful. Tiffany stood by the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, trying to look stern, but failing to hide her uncertainty. Neither of them said goodbye. The car started on the first try, my old Buick reliable as always. I backed out of the driveway without looking at the house, without seeing if they were watching from the window. The 30-minute drive to Pine Lodge gave me time to think. The memories came in waves as I drove through downtown Kalispell. Tiffany's college tuition, $40,000 a year for that fancy private school she had insisted on. I had worked overtime at the bank for 4 straight years, taking on extra clients, staying late to review loan applications. My hands cramped just remembering all those forms. Her wedding had cost $25,000. Harry's family could not afford their half, so I had covered it quietly, not wanting to embarrass anyone. The reception hall, the flowers, her dress, everything had to be perfect for my little girl's special day. Then came the house $80,000 from my retirement savings for their down payment, because young couples needed help getting started. That is what fathers did, I told myself. That is what Martha would have wanted. The monthly payments followed like clockwork. $1,200 for their mortgage, $300 for utilities, $500 for groceries when money got tight. My social security check disappeared into their lives piece by piece, and I had convinced myself it was love. Pine Lodge Motel sat on the outskirts of town, a low building with faded paint and a neon sign that flickered intermittently. The room was small but clean. A bed, a chair, a tiny table by the window. I set my suitcase on the luggage rack and sat heavily on the mattress edge. The silence was different here. Not the comfortable quiet of my own home, but the hollow emptiness of a temporary space. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the contacts. Bank numbers, insurance companies, credit card services, numbers I knew by heart, from 30 years in finance. Tomorrow was Sunday, but some things could still be done, some calls could still be made. I opened my laptop on the small table and logged into my online banking. Account balances glowed on the screen, checking savings, retirement accounts, numbers that represented a lifetime of careful planning, of denying myself small luxuries so I could take care of my family. The cursor blinked in the search bar, waiting for me to decide what came next. Sunday morning arrived grey and overcast, fitting my mood perfectly. I spread my paperwork across the motel table like a general planning a campaign. Bank statements, insurance policies, legal documents, everything organised, everything within reach. The first call went to First National Bank. Sunday banking was limited, but automated systems never slept. "Good morning, Mr. Miller," the representative said after I navigated through the phone tree. "How can I help you today? I need to cancel the automatic mortgage payment for 847 Pine Street, the account ending in 4729. A pause. Computer keys clicking. "Sir, I show that payment has been active for 5 years. Are you sure you want to discontinue it?" "Completely sure." "May I ask the reason for the change?" "The homeowners no longer qualify for my financial assistance." More clicking. "Very well, Mr. Miller. The automatic payment will be cancelled effective immediately. You should receive written confirmation within 3 business days." The second call was easier. Geico had been insuring both their cars on my policy for 3 years. Harry's Silverado, Tiffany's Honda. $280 every month for vehicles I never drove, coverage for accidents I would never cause. I need to remove 2 vehicles from my policy, I told the agent. My daughter and son-in-law will need to establish their own coverage. When would you like this change to take effect today? The credit cards took longer. Tiffany was an authorized user on 3 of my accounts, Visa, MasterCard, and the store card from Costco. $500 monthly I had been paying on balances I had never created, purchases I had never made. Mr. Miller removing authorized users will require them to apply for their own credit, the Visa representative explained. Any outstanding balances will remain your responsibility, but they will not be able to make new charges. I understand. Remove them immediately. Each call felt like lifting a weight from my shoulders. 30 years of banking experience had taught me the system's ins and outs, the legal language, the proper procedures. Everything I was doing was completely within my rights. The life insurance change required written documentation, but I started the process. $100,000 that was supposed to go to Tiffany money I had earned to protect my family's future. But family meant something different now. By noon, I had made 8 calls, mortgage payments, stopped insurance, cancelled, credit cards, blocked the automatic transfers that had been bleeding my accounts dry for years. All of it ended with polite conversations and confirmation numbers. I sat back in the cheap motel chair and looked at my notes. Confirmation numbers, reference codes, effective dates. The paper trail of financial independence. My phone sat silent on the table. No missed calls, no urgent messages. They did not know yet. Probably would not know until the first payment bounced. The first bill arrived with their names on it instead of mine, but they would know soon enough. I closed my laptop and walked to the window. Across the parking lot, an elderly man was loading suitcases into a pickup truck, his wife directing the operation with gentle efficiency, probably heading home from visiting grandchildren, or maybe starting a long-postponed vacation. I envied their easy partnership, the way they moved around each other with practiced familiarity. Martha and I had been like that once. My phone buzzed against the table. Unknown number. I let it ring. The week passed quietly for me, but apparently not for them. I had settled into a routine at Pine Lodge. Coffee from the lobby, breakfast at the diner down the street, long walks around Kalispell's quiet neighborhoods. My phone accumulated missed calls like a collection I had no interest in starting. By Wednesday, there were 12 messages. By Friday, 22. I listened to them in chronological order, watching the progression from confusion to anger to desperation. The first few were almost casual Tiffany, asking if there was some kind of banking error with the mortgage payment. Harry leaving brief annoyed messages about the car insurance lapsing. But by the middle of the week, panic had crept in. "Dad, what the hell is going on?" Tiffany's voice cracked with frustration. "The bank says you stopped the automatic payment. They want the full amount by Friday, or they will start foreclosure proceedings." Harry's messages grew increasingly aggressive. "Clark, you need to fix this right now. I have got people asking questions about my insurance. You are making us look like dead beats." The later calls bordered on begging. Tiffany crying, promising they would work something out if I just called them back. Harry trying a different approach, claiming he had been too harsh and wanted to make things right. I deleted each message after listening, feeling nothing but mild curiosity about their growing desperation. Thursday morning brought a knock at my motel room door. Through the peephole, I saw them both. Tiffany in a wrinkled sweater, Harry in his work clothes, both looking like they had slept badly. I opened the door, but did not invite them in. "Dad." Tiffany's eyes were red-rimmed. Her usual composure cracked. "We need to talk." About what? Harry pushed forward, his face flushed with anger. "About the fact that you are trying to ruin our lives over some stupid argument about beer." "I am not trying to ruin anything," I said calmly. "I am simply no longer paying for your lives." "The mortgage," Clark Harry's voice rose. "You cannot just stop paying the mortgage. That is our house. Actually, it is my house. My name on the deed, my signature on the loan. You two were just guests." Tiffany grabbed Harry's arm as he stepped closer to the door. "Dad, please, we can work this out. Harry was wrong to talk to you that way." We both were. "But you cannot just leave us with no warning, no discussion. You gave me an ultimatum," I reminded her. "Do what Harry says, or get out." "Those were your exact words." "I did not mean it like that." "Yes, you did." I looked at my daughter, seeing a stranger wearing her face. You meant every word. You just did not expect me to choose option 2. Harry tried a different approach, his voice artificially calm. Look, we all said things we did not mean. But you are talking about our home, our credit, our whole lives. You cannot just pull the rug out like this. I can, and I did. I started to close the door. You wanted me to leave. I left. You wanted to handle your own lives. Now you can. Dad, wait. Tiffany's voice broke. What about family? What about everything we have been through together? I paused, looking at her desperate face. For a moment, I remembered the little girl who used to help me rake leaves in the fall, who brought me dandelions she had picked from the yard. But that little girl had grown into someone who could stand by while her husband humiliated her father in his own living room. Family works both ways, sweetheart, I said quietly. I spent 5 years taking care of you both. When it was time for you to take care of me, you chose him instead. Harry's fake composure cracked. You crazy old bastard. You cannot just... I can call the police if you keep raising your voice. I interrupted. This is private property, and you are disturbing the peace. They stared at me, probably seeing me clearly for the first time in years. Not the soft-hearted father and grandfather to be, not the convenient bank account with legs, just a man who had finally learned to say no. Harry grabbed Tiffany's elbow. Come on, we will figure this out ourselves. They walked back to their car, Harry's swagger replaced by worried hunching, Tiffany looking back over her shoulder like she was seeing a stranger. I watched them drive away, then closed the door and returned to my laptop. There were still calls to make, still accounts to close. The work of dismantling a relationship was far from finished. I needed coffee and a chance to think clearly. The diner on Main Street had always been my refuge when Martha was alive. She would meet me there after her doctor appointments, and we would split a piece of apple pie while discussing nothing important. Tuesday morning found me walking the familiar 3 blocks, my breath visible in the crisp mountain air. The routine felt grounding after yesterday's confrontation. I had organised my paperwork again this morning, reviewing bank statements and confirmation numbers like a general studying battle plans. The diner's bell chimed as I entered. Coffee steam and bacon grease created that comfortable fog of normalcy I craved. I had barely settled into my usual corner booth when a familiar voice called out Clark Miller. Well, I will be damned. Bob Harrison rose from a table near the window, newspaper folded under his arm. We had worked together at First National for 15 years before his transfer to the main branch. Bob had handled commercial loans while I managed personal accounts, but we had shared enough coffee breaks to consider ourselves friends. Bob. I stood to shake his hand. Good to see you. Mind if I join you? Have not seen you since Martha's service. He slid into the opposite seat without waiting for an answer. Heard you moved out to Pine Lodge. Everything all right? The waitress appeared with coffee before I could answer. I used the interruption to consider how much to share. Bob was trustworthy, but he was also a banker with professional obligations. Family situation. I said finally needed some space to think things through. Bob nodded slowly, studying my face. That son-in-law of yours tried to pull a fast one on us a few months back. My coffee cup stopped halfway to my lips. What kind of fast one wanted a home equity loan on your house, 50,000? Bob's expression darkened. Claimed it was his property. Brought in documentation and everything. The diner's ambient noise seemed to fade. My house, he said. He owned my house. That is right. Had some paperwork that looked official at first glance. But when we ran the title search, Bob shook his head. Everything came back to you, of course. Clean title, no co-signers, nothing that would give him any claim to the property. I set my cup down, carefully processing this information. When exactly did this happen? December, maybe January. I handled the application personally because of the amount involved. Bob leaned forward, lowering his voice. Clark, he was not just mistaken about ownership. This was deliberate fraud. The documents he brought in were forged. The implications hit me like cold water. 3 months ago, Harry had been planning to steal from me. This was not desperation born from our current crisis. This was premeditated deception. Did you report it? We rejected the application and flagged his information in our system. Technically, since no money changed hands, it is a grey area legally, but I kept copies of everything. Bob studied my expression. You really did not know about this. I shook my head, thinking about all those monthly payments I'd been making, all the dinners where Harry had complained about money troubles while planning to rob me behind my back. What was he going to use the money for? Bob glanced around the diner, then leaned closer. According to his application, home improvements, but word around town is Harry has got gambling debts, pretty substantial ones. How substantial? Jim Morrison might know more. You remember Detective Morrison? He mentioned something about Harry being a regular at Glacier Peaks Casino. I did remember Jim Morrison. We had served on the church building committee together, and his daughter had been in Tiffany's graduating class. If Jim had information about Harry's gambling, it was probably accurate. Bob, I appreciate you telling me this. I pulled out my wallet to pay for coffee I had barely touched. Clark, be careful. A man who had forged documents to steal from family might do other desperate things when he is cornered. I walked back to Pine Lodge with my mind racing. Harry's beer demand and disrespect suddenly made more sense. He had already seen me as a convenient source of cash for his gambling habit. The ultimatum was not about establishing dominance, it was about maintaining access to money he believed he was entitled to steal. Back in my motel room, I opened my laptop and created a new document titled Harry Thompson Evidence. Bob's revelation was just the beginning. If Harry had been lying about this, what else had he been hiding? The courthouse closed at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. I had 1 hour to file the paperwork that would change everything. After lunch, I drove straight from the diner to the Flathead County Courthouse, an imposing brick building that had intimidated me as a young man, but now seemed like an ally. The clerk's office was on the second floor, staffed by a middle-aged woman who processed my eviction notice with professional efficiency. Mr. Miller, you understand, this is your daughter's residence. She reviewed the property deed I had provided, comparing it to the eviction documents. It is my property. The residents have violated the terms of their occupancy. What terms would those be? I had prepared for this question. Verbal agreement requiring mutual respect and contribution to household expenses. Both conditions have been breached. She stamped the papers with practiced authority. 30-day notice period begins today. If they contest, we will schedule a hearing. Otherwise, the sheriff will serve final papers after the deadline. How long before they receive this? Sheriff's Department handles service of process usually within 48 hours. I thanked her and collected my copies, feeling the weight of legal authority behind my actions. No more financial manipulation or emotional blackmail. Everything was going through proper channels. Now my next stop was the police station. Detective Jim Morrison's office was tucked in the back corner of the building, a cramped space dominated by filing cabinets and coffee-stained paperwork. Jim had aged since I had last seen him. More grey hair, deeper lines around his eyes, but his handshake was still firm. Clark, what brings you to my corner of the world information gathering? Bob Harrison mentioned you might know something about Harry Thompson's gambling activities. Jim's expression shifted to professional interest. Your son-in-law, what is the context here? I explained the situation briefly. The ultimatum, my departure, the discovery of Harry's attempted loan fraud. Jim listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes. Harry is definitely known at Glacier Peaks, Jim said when I finished. Regular player, usually at the poker tables. Staff mentioned he has been more frequent lately, playing higher stakes. Any idea how much he owes different creditors different amounts? We have had calls about collection issues. Nothing criminal yet, but heading that direction. I would estimate 18 to 20,000 total. The numbers staggered me. Harry had been living in my house, eating my food, demanding my respect, while secretly burning through enough money to buy a decent car. Who are these creditors' mix of legitimate lenders and less savoury characters? The legitimate ones are getting impatient. The others? Jim shrugged. Let us just say they do not usually involve law enforcement in their collection methods. What is the timeline looking like? He's been stalling for about 6 weeks. Most creditors will give someone 3 months before escalating. Harry is running out of road. I left the police station with a clearer picture of my son-in-law's situation. The gambling explained his desperation, his attempt to fraudulently mortgage my house, and his increasing aggression toward me. I was not just a convenient funding source. I was his only hope of avoiding serious consequences. That evening, I sat in my motel room reviewing the day's progress. Legal eviction notice filed and ready for service, confirmation of Harry's gambling debts and fraudulent activities, a growing network of professional allies who understood the real situation. I opened my laptop and updated my evidence file, adding Jim Morrison's information to Bob Harrison's revelations. Pattern recognition had been a crucial skill in banking, and the patterns here were becoming crystal clear. Harry was not just disrespectful or entitled, he was desperate, dishonest, and dangerous. The more pressure he felt, the more reckless he would become. I needed to be ready for whatever came next. Tomorrow, I would start making strategic phone calls to Harry's creditors not to pay his debts. Those consequences were his to face, but to ensure they knew his true financial situation, including the fact that he had no legal claim to my property. The truth was always the best weapon. Word travels fast in a town like Kalispell. By Friday, I realized it was time to control the narrative. My first encounter happened at the post office, where Mrs. Henderson, from the church mailing committee, cornered me near the stamp machine. She was one of those women who collected information like others collected recipes, always ready to share what she had learned. Clark, dear, I have been hearing troubling things about family troubles. Is everything all right? I considered my response carefully. Mrs. Henderson would repeat whatever I said to at least a dozen people by Sunday service. Tiffany and Harry asked me to move out, so I did. Sometimes adult children need to handle their own responsibilities. Her eyebrows rose. They asked you to leave your own house. It seemed like the best solution for everyone involved. But did you not pay for their wedding and help them with the down payment? She leaned closer, lowering her voice conspiratorially. I always wondered how they afforded that house on Harry's salary. I nodded, but did not elaborate. The facts would speak for themselves. My next stop was Miller's Hardware, where I had worked part-time after retiring from the bank. Tom Kowalski, the owner, looked up from his inventory sheets with genuine concern. Clark heard, you are staying out at Pine Lodge. What is going on? 3 other employees gathered around as I explained the situation. Their reactions were immediate and unanimous, shocked that Harry had treated me so disrespectfully, anger that I had been supporting them financially for years without recognition. You paid for their college tuition. Dave, the assistant manager, shook his head in disbelief. Harry told everyone his family was well off. Said they were helping you with mortgage payments. Harry said a lot of things that were not true. I replied calmly. Tom's expression darkened. That explains why he always seemed to have money but never worked overtime. We offered him extra shifts plenty of times, but he always had other commitments. Those commitments were probably at the casino, muttered Sarah from the paint counter. Have you ever sacrificed for loved ones and later realized they only took advantage of your kindness? Share your story in the comments, and if you have been there, comment number 1 below. By the time I left the hardware store, I knew the real story would be all over town within hours. Kalispell's small-town network was more efficient than any advertising campaign. My third stop was St. Mark's Lutheran Church, where Pastor Williams was preparing for the weekend services. He invited me into his office, offering coffee and a chair that had comforted many troubled parishioners over the years. Clark, several people have mentioned they are concerned about you. Can you help me understand what is happening? I appreciated Pastor Williams' direct approach. He was not fishing for gossip. He was trying to help a member of his congregation. Pastor, I have been financially supporting my daughter and son-in-law for 5 years. Last weekend, they made it clear that my presence in the house was conditional on my following Harry's orders. I chose to leave rather than accept that arrangement. That must have been incredibly painful. It was clarifying, I said honestly. I love my daughter, but I will not be treated like a servant in my own home. Pastor Williams nodded thoughtfully. Sometimes, loving someone means allowing them to face the consequences of their choices. It sounds like you have been protecting them from those consequences for a long time. Too long, I think. During my walk back to the motel, I stopped at Annie's coffee shop for an afternoon cup. The place was busy with the usual Friday crowd. Retirees off duty, workers, mothers with strollers. I found a small table in the corner and listened to the conversations flowing around me. Heard Harry owes money all over town. Clark Miller has been paying their bills for years. Always seemed odd how they lived so well on his salary. The information was spreading exactly as I had expected. Small towns were like organisms. They processed information quickly and efficiently, separating truth from fiction through collective wisdom. My phone rang as I was leaving the coffee shop. Mrs. Patterson, my next-door neighbour for 20 years. Clark, I hope you do not mind me calling. I wanted you to know there has been a lot of shouting at the house lately. Mostly Harry, but Tiffany too. Yesterday the police drove by twice. Thank you for letting me know, Mrs. Patterson. I appreciate you keeping an eye on things. Are you safe where you are staying? Do you need anything? The genuine concern in her voice reminded me that community support came in many forms. I am fine, thank you. Just taking things one day at a time. That evening I sat in my motel room reviewing the day's conversations. The social pressure was building naturally without any vindictive effort on my part. People simply recognized injustice when they saw it clearly. My phone rang again. Unknown number, but I recognized the area code. One of Harry's creditors, most likely. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to the message. This is Marcus Webb from Frontier Financial Services. We are looking for Harry Thompson regarding a past due account. Please call us at your earliest convenience. They were calling me because Harry had probably listed my house as his address on credit applications. More evidence of his deception, more proof that he had been planning to make me responsible for his debts. I deleted the message and opened my laptop. Time to update my evidence file with today's discoveries. I should have expected them to fight back. Harry never was one to go down quietly. Saturday morning started peacefully enough. I was reviewing bank statements over coffee when my phone began ringing. First Tom from the hardware store, then Mrs. Henderson, then Pastor Williams. Each call brought the same disturbing news. Harry was making rounds through town spreading an alternative version of events. Clark, I think you need to know what he is saying. Tom's voice carried barely controlled anger. He came in here about an hour ago, loud as you please, telling everyone you abandoned them without warning. Claims you promised to always take care of them, then changed your mind out of spite. What exactly did he say? That you are having some kind of mental breakdown? Said you threw them out because Tiffany would not let you control every decision in their lives. Tom paused. He's also claiming there is a family medical emergency that requires money and you are refusing to help. I thanked Tom and hung up my mind, already working through the implications. Harry was desperate enough to launch a public relations campaign, which meant the pressure from his creditors was intensifying. The next call confirmed my suspicions. Mr. Miller, this is Detective Morrison. I wanted to give you a heads up. Harry Thompson was here this morning filing a complaint about elder abuse. Claims you are being manipulated by someone at the bank to make bad financial decisions. Elder abuse. Complete nonsense, of course. But he is trying to create an official record of your supposed mental incompetence. I told him we would need medical documentation and witness statements, which he obviously cannot provide. 20 minutes later, my phone rang again. Tiffany's number. Dad, please pick up. I know you are angry, but there are things you do not understand. Her voice was thick with tears. I am pregnant, Dad. The stress from all this is making me sick. The doctor says if things do not calm down, I could lose the baby. I felt a familiar twist in my stomach, the same protective instinct that had made me vulnerable to their manipulation for years. But something in her tone seemed rehearsed, desperate, in a calculated way. Congratulations on the pregnancy, sweetheart. When did you find out? Last week? Right before everything fell apart. Her voice broke convincingly. Dad, I cannot lose my baby because of money problems. You always said family comes first. Family does come first. That is why I spent $60,000 on your education and $25,000 on your wedding. But what about now? What about your grandchild? The question hung in the air. If she was really pregnant, if there was really a medical crisis, then my actions could have unintended consequences. But the timing seemed too convenient. The emotional manipulation too practiced. Tiffany, have you seen a doctor about these pregnancy complications? A pause. I have an appointment next week. Which doctor? Dr. Richards, at the women's clinic. I knew Dr. Richards. Martha had seen her for years. I will call her office to see how I can help with medical expenses. Dad, you do not need to call. If there is a genuine medical emergency involving my grandchild, I want to help. Dr. Richards will know the best way to handle things. Tiffany's voice became sharp. You cannot just call my doctor. That is private information. You are right. You can have her call me directly to discuss payment options. The call ended abruptly. An hour later, I was walking downtown when I encountered Harry outside the First National Bank. He was talking loudly to anyone who would listen, his voice carrying that aggressive edge I had learned to recognize. He has lost his mind, Harry was saying to a small crowd of customers. Senile old man thinks everyone is trying to steal from him. Kicked his own pregnant daughter out of the house over nothing. I approached calmly and the crowd noticed me before Harry did. Faces turned in my direction, expressions shifting as they recognized the subject of Harry's rant. Harry spun around, his face flushing red. There he is, the man who abandoned his own family. Hello, Harry. I kept my voice level. How is the gambling debt situation working out? The accusation hit him like a physical blow. Several people in the crowd murmured among themselves, pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. You are crazy, Harry sputtered. I do not know what you are talking about. 18,000, according to Detective Morrison. Glacier Peaks Casino, mostly poker tables. I looked at the gathering crowd. Amazing how much money someone can lose when they are not paying their own living expenses. Harry's face went from red to purple. He stepped closer, using his height advantage like a weapon. You senile old bastard, you cannot just— I can document every dollar I have spent supporting you for 5 years, I interrupted. Can you document where your paychecks went? The crowd was listening intently now, processing this new information. Harry realized he had lost control of the narrative. Come on, he growled, pushing through the crowd. This is not over, Clark. I watched him storm away, noting how several people pulled out their phones. The real story would be all over social media within the hour. Back at the motel, I opened my laptop and began documenting the day's events. Harry's counterattack was failing because it was built on lies that could not withstand scrutiny. The community knew my character too well to believe his accusations of mental incompetence or vindictive abandonment. But the pregnancy claim worried me. If Tiffany was really pregnant, the situation became more complicated. I needed verification before making my next move. I picked up my phone and dialed Dr. Richard's office. If there was a real medical emergency, I would help, but I would not be manipulated by fabricated crisis. Harry's public threats had crossed the line. I walked back to my motel room, pulled out my phone, and called Detective Morrison. James, we need to talk. Harry's behaviour today showed a pattern of escalation that concerns me. How so he confronted me publicly, made threatening gestures in front of witnesses, and his whole demeanour suggested someone losing control. I looked out my motel window toward downtown. I would like to file a formal complaint and explore protection options. Come in tomorrow morning. Bring any documentation you have, but I did not need to wait until morning. Steve Brennan, the Pine Lodge night manager, knocked on my door an hour later. Mr. Miller, that man who was yelling in our parking lot earlier, he came back about 20 minutes ago. Stood outside your door for maybe 5 minutes, then left. Made some guests nervous. Steve was a retired army sergeant who had seen enough trouble to recognize it developing. Did he say anything specific? Muttered something about teaching old fools lessons. I have got it on security video if you need it. Security footage, physical evidence of Harry's threatening behavior on private property. Steve, would you be willing to provide that footage to the police? Absolutely. Guy like that should not be intimidating elderly residents. The next morning, I arrived at the police station with Steve's security USB drive and a written timeline of Harry's escalating behavior. Detective Morrison reviewed everything with professional thoroughness. Clark, this shows a clear pattern of intimidation. Combined with what I witnessed yesterday at the bank, we have grounds for a restraining order. What would that involve? Legal prohibition against Harry coming within 500 feet of you or your property. Violation means immediate arrest. Jim leaned back in his chair. There is something else you should know. Harry consulted with a lawyer Friday about adverse possession laws. The words hit me like cold water. Squatters' rights, exactly. He was researching whether he could claim legal ownership of your house based on living there continuously. Jim's expression was grim. Montana requires 5 years of hostile occupation. They have been there 3 years. He was planning to wait 2 more years, then file a claim. The implications staggered me. Harry had not just been freeloading, he had been executing a long-term plan to steal my family home through legal technicalities. Does he have any legitimate claim? None whatsoever. Adverse possession requires hostile occupation without the owner's permission. Since you gave them permission to live there, and they never paid rent or property taxes, there is no legal basis. Jim pulled out a file folder, but it shows premeditation, or he has been planning this theft for years. What about the restraining order? I can fast track it given the evidence. You will have it by this afternoon. I left the police station with a new understanding of my son-in-law's character. The beer incident had not been about establishing dominance. It had been about maintaining a deception that would culminate in stealing my home. Walking back to my car, I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts. Time to make some strategic calls. The first was to Marcus Webb at Frontier Financial Services, one of Harry's creditors, who had been calling my number. Marcus Webb, I am returning your call about Harry Thompson. I need to clarify something important. He does not live at my address anymore and has no legal claim to my property. He listed that address as his residence on all credit applications. He was a guest in my home. I evicted him last week. If you are looking for him, he works at Mountain View Auto Dealership on Highway 93. The second call was to Continental Credit Recovery. This is Clark Miller. You have been calling about Harry Thompson's debts. I want to clarify that Mr. Thompson has no ownership interest in my property and is no longer residing there. Each call was brief and factual. I was not paying Harry's debts or providing personal information, just correcting the false address he had been using to avoid his creditors. By noon, I had contacted 6 different collection agencies. Harry's carefully constructed house of cards was about to collapse. That afternoon, Judge Morrison signed my restraining order. Harry Thompson was now legally prohibited from coming within 500 feet of me or my property. Violation would result in immediate arrest and possible jail time. I drove back to Pine Lodge, feeling the satisfaction of justice properly applied. Harry had spent 3 years planning to steal my home. Now he could not even approach it legally. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is not over, old man. I forwarded the message to Detective Morrison, then blocked the number. Evidence collection had become second nature. Monday morning, I filed the restraining order. By noon, I was watching Harry's world collapse from multiple directions. The courthouse clerk stamped the final copy with efficient authority. Mr. Miller, this order is effective immediately. Any contact or approach within 500 feet constitutes a violation. I thanked her and walked to my car, knowing the sheriff's deputy would serve Harry the papers within hours. My phone was already ringing. Clark, this is Mike Brennan from Mountain View Auto. Mike was Harry's boss, a decent man who had built his dealership on reputation and trust. I need to ask you something directly. Are the things Harry has been saying about you true? What has he been saying? That you had some kind of breakdown and threw him out because of dementia, that there is a family medical emergency, and you are refusing to help? Mike's voice carried skepticism. Thing is, Clark, I have known you for 20 years. This does not sound like the man who co-signed my son's first car loan. Mike Harry gave me an ultimatum to obey his orders or leave. I chose to leave. There is no medical emergency and my mental faculties are fine, as my banker lawyer and police detective can confirm. A long pause. I was afraid of that. Clark, I have got 3 customers today who mentioned Harry owing them money. One recognized him from the casino. This is affecting my business. I understand. I am going to have to let him go. Cannot have this kind of controversy around customers who trust us with major purchases. 20 minutes later, I was having coffee at Annie when I saw the first debt collector pull up to my former house, Continental Credit Recovery, based on the magnetic door sign. I had spoken with them Friday about Harry Thompson's false address claims. My phone rang. Tiffany's number. Dad, there are men at the house asking about Harry's debts. They want to know about our assets, our income, everything. Her voice carried genuine panic now. What did you tell them? I told them the truth. That Harry does not own my property and no longer lives there. But they are talking about garnishing wages, seizing assets. Dad, I do not understand any of this. Sweetheart, that is what happens when someone borrows money they cannot repay. Those are consequences Harry created, not me. He owes $18,000. How is that possible? So she really had not known the full extent. Gambling debts, Glacier Peaks, casino, according to Detective Morrison. Silence on the line, then quietly. He told me he was working overtime those nights. I am sorry you are learning this way, Tiffany, and the sheriff's deputy was here too. Served Harry some kind of legal papers. He has been ranting and throwing things ever since. The restraining order. Harry was probably just realizing that his options had evaporated completely. Dad, he is talking about leaving town. Says there is nothing left here for him. Her voice cracked. What am I supposed to do? Make decisions based on who Harry really is, not who you hoped he was. That evening I parked across the street from my former house and watched the chaos unfold. 3 different creditor vehicles had visited during the day. Mrs. Patterson next door waved at me sadly. She had been watching the situation develop with the concern of a long-time neighbour. Through the living room window, I could see Harry and Tiffany arguing. His gestures were aggressive, desperate. Hers looked defensive, frightened. The fairy tale marriage built on my financial foundation was crumbling as reality intruded. My phone buzzed. A text from Steve Brennan at Pine Lodge. That guy tried to get in the building again, told him about the restraining order. He left, but he was really angry. I forwarded the message to Detective Morrison. Harry was violating the restraining order within hours of being served. His desperation was making him reckless, which made him dangerous, but it also made him predictable. A desperate man with gambling debts, no job and legal troubles had limited options. He could face his responsibilities like an adult, or he could run. Given what I had learned about Harry's character, running seemed most likely. I drove back to Pine Lodge, considering the implications. If Harry fled town to escape his creditors, what would happen to Tiffany? Would she go with him, choosing loyalty to a man who deceived her for years? Or would she finally see him clearly and make a different choice? Either way, the consequences were theirs to face. I had spent 5 years protecting them from reality. That protection had ended the day they asked me to choose between my dignity and their demands. I had chosen dignity. Now they could choose their own path forward. 2 days of watching their desperation was enough. I called Tiffany Wednesday morning and told her to meet me at the diner. Just her. I cannot leave Harry alone right now, Dad. He is really struggling with everything that is happening. Then we have nothing to discuss. The restraining order means I cannot be around him anyway. A long pause. Where do you want to meet? Main Street Diner, 2 o'clock back corner. Booth where we can talk privately. I arrived early and chose the booth facing away from the street. I wanted this conversation to focus on words, not worried glances at passing cars. When Tiffany arrived, she looked older than her 28 years. Stress lines around her eyes, nervous fidgeting with her purse strap. She slid into the opposite seat and immediately started talking. Dad, I know you are angry, but Harry has lost his job, and these debt collectors will not leave us alone. The phone rings constantly. People are showing up at the door, demanding money we do not have. I waited until she finished, then spoke calmly. I am offering you one chance to end this with some dignity, Tiffany. What do you mean, public acknowledgement of the truth? Full disclosure of how much I've supported you both, and an honest explanation of why I left. Her face flushed. You want me to humiliate myself in front of the whole town. I want you to tell the truth. There is a difference. What kind of acknowledgement? I had spent 2 days thinking through exactly what justice required. Church announcement. Sunday during testimony time. Letter to the editor of the Tribune. Facebook post visible to all our mutual connections. Full details about college tuition, wedding costs, mortgage payments, and the ultimatum that caused me to leave. Dad, people will think you had a father who loved you enough to sacrifice his retirement security for your happiness, and that you took it for granted until it was gone. Tiffany stared at her untouched coffee. What about Harry? Harry is no longer part of any equation involving me. The restraining order is permanent. If you choose to stay married to him, that is your decision. But it means choosing him over any relationship with me. You are asking me to choose between my husband and my father. I am asking you to choose between a man who threatened me and a man who raised you. The fact that you see those as equivalent choices tells me everything about how far we have drifted apart. She was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications. What about the house? It has been in our family for generations. It is going to the Montana Veterans Housing Initiative. 3 families of veterans will live there. People who understand what service and sacrifice actually mean. The words hit her like a physical blow. The will already changed, witnessed, signed, and filed with my attorney. I kept my voice gentle but firm. Even if you do everything I have asked perfectly, the house will not come back to you. That decision is final. Why? Because I need to know that any reconciliation between us is based on love, not inheritance expectations. For 5 years, you treated me like a convenient funding source. I want to see if there is anything left between us beyond financial dependency. Tiffany's eyes filled with tears. Real ones this time, not the calculated manipulation I had grown accustomed to. I am sorry, Dad. I really am. I never meant for things to go this far. Sorry is not enough anymore, sweetheart. The whole town watched you and Harry treat me like a servant in my own home. They watched you choose his demands over my dignity. Words are just words now. I need to see actions. What if I cannot do it? What if I cannot stand up in front of everyone and admit how wrong we were? Then you will live with the consequences of that choice. Harry will probably leave town to escape his creditors. Men like him always run when things get difficult. You can go with him and start over somewhere else, or you can stay here and try to rebuild your life with honesty. And if I do what you are asking, then maybe over time we can build a real relationship, not based on money or guilt or obligation, but on mutual respect between 2 adults. Tiffany wiped her eyes with a napkin. How long do I have to decide Sunday morning? Church starts at 10 o'clock. If you are not there to tell the truth, I will know you have made your choice. She stood slowly, looking older and more fragile than when she had arrived. Dad, do you think you could ever forgive me? I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and saw glimpses of the little girl who used to braid dandelions into crowns and demand bedtime stories about brave princesses. Forgiveness and trust are different things, Tiffany. I forgave you the day I decided to leave rather than fight, but trust has to be earned back one honest action at a time. She nodded and walked toward the door, shoulders bent under the weight of a decision that would determine the rest of her life. I remained in the booth, watching her drive away. Sunday was 4 days away. By then, I would know whether my daughter had the courage to choose truth over comfort, responsibility over loyalty to someone who had never deserved it. Sunday morning arrived clear and cold. I walked into St. Mark's, wondering if Tiffany would find the courage to tell the truth. The sanctuary was fuller than usual. Word had gotten around about some kind of family announcement. I took my regular pew 3 rows from the front and waited. Pastor Williams began the service with familiar hymns and readings, but I could feel the congregation's anticipative energy. When testimony time came, Tiffany stood from the back row. She looked small, walking down the center aisle, but her steps were steady. At the podium, she gripped the edges and looked out at faces she had known her entire life. I need to tell you all something important about my father. Her voice carried clearly through the silent sanctuary. For the past 5 years, Clark Miller has been supporting my husband and me financially. He paid $160,000 for my college education when I could have gone to a state school. He paid $25,000 for my wedding when Harry's family could not afford their share. Murmurs rippled through the congregation. These were specific numbers, documented sacrifices, that painted a clear picture. He gave us his family home, the house his parents left him, where he had lived with my mother for 20 years. When we could not make mortgage payments, he paid them. When we needed groceries, utilities, car insurance, he paid for everything while living on Social Security. Her voice strengthened as she continued. 3 weeks ago, when my father would not follow my husband's orders like a servant, we gave him an ultimatum. Obey Harry or leave his own house. Dad chose to leave rather than surrender his dignity. The sanctuary was completely silent now. Even the children seemed to sense the gravity of her words. I stood by and watched my husband disrespect the man who sacrificed his retirement security for our comfort. I chose loyalty to someone who threatened my father over loyalty to the man who raised me with love and patience. Tears flowed freely now, but her voice remained clear. I am standing here because my father offered me one last chance to choose truth over pride. I was wrong. Harry was wrong. My father deserved gratitude and respect, and instead we gave him ultimatums and demands. She looked directly at me. Dad, I am sorry is not enough for what we put you through, but I am hoping it is a start. The congregation erupted in supportive murmurs as Tiffany returned to her seat. Pastor Williams approached the podium with tears in his own eyes. Sometimes the hardest courage is admitting our mistakes publicly. Tiffany has shown that courage today, and her father has shown us what dignity looks like under pressure. After the service, people approached me with embraces, handshakes, and words of support. Mrs. Henderson squeezed my hand. We all suspected you were helping them financially, Clark. What we did not know was how they repaid your kindness. Tom Kowalski from the hardware store clapped my shoulder. That took real character, what you did. Setting boundaries is not easy when family is involved, but the most meaningful moment came when Tiffany approached me outside the church. The letter to the Tribune will run Wednesday. The Facebook post goes up tonight. She hesitated. Harry left town yesterday, packed his truck while I was at work, and disappeared. No forwarding address, no note, nothing. I was not surprised. Men like Harry always ran when confronted with consequences. I am sorry your marriage ended this way. I am not, she said quietly. I filed for divorce this morning. Found out he had been using my credit cards for gambling without telling me. The debts are worse than we thought. 3 months later, I stood in the front yard of my former family home watching 3 veteran families move into the transitional housing units the Montana Veterans Housing Initiative had created. The house had been renovated into separate apartments, each family getting privacy while sharing common areas. Staff Sergeant Maria Santos recently returned from deployment, directed her 2 children toward the playground equipment donated by local businesses. Mr. Miller, this opportunity means everything to us. Thank you for choosing veterans for this gift. Veterans understand sacrifice, I replied. This house should serve people who have actually earned it. My own life had settled into peaceful routines at the lakeside cabin I had purchased, with money no longer flowing to ungrateful dependents. Morning coffee on the deck overlooking Flathead Lake. Afternoon fishing evening, reading simple pleasures that felt luxurious after years of financial stress and family drama. The cabin was small, but perfectly suited to my needs. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen where I could cook real meals instead of eating restaurant food constantly, and a dock where I could launch my small fishing boat. My phone buzzed with a text from Tiffany. Dad, I am 3 months into counselling and learning a lot about healthy relationships. Could we try having coffee sometime? I would like to earn your trust back one conversation at a time. I smiled, looking out at the lake where an osprey was fishing in the shallows. Tiffany had kept her word about the public acknowledgements. The newspaper letter had been thorough and honest. The Facebook post had generated dozens of supportive comments from community members who finally understood the real story. More importantly, she was taking responsibility for rebuilding our relationship instead of expecting forgiveness without effort. I typed back, "Coffee sounds good. Saturday morning at the diner." Her response came immediately, "I will be there. And Dad, thank you for not giving up on me completely." I set the phone aside and watched the osprey rise from the water with a fish in its talons. Sometimes patience and dignity were rewarded, even when the wait seemed endless. The sun was setting over the Rockies, painting the lake surface golden orange. In the distance, I could hear children laughing at the veterans' housing complex families, building new lives in the home where I had learned the difference between generosity and enabling. Justice served, dignity preserved, and maybe, just maybe, a daughter ready to earn back her father's trust through honest effort, rather than emotional manipulation. It had been worth the wait. And as I sat there, I realized the greatest lesson of all was not about money or property or even betrayal. It was about choosing dignity over submission, truth over illusion, and patience over resentment. For 5 years, I thought sacrifice meant giving until I had nothing left. But real sacrifice is knowing when to stop, when to let others face the weight of their own choices, and when to protect what is sacred in yourself. I learned that forgiveness can be given, but trust must be earned. And I understood at last that love without respect is only dependency dressed as devotion. That is the truth I will carry into the rest of my days. If you have ever faced the choice between keeping your dignity or giving in to someone else's demands, share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. I truly want to hear them. Please leave a like, share this story with someone who might need it, and subscribe with the notification bell on if you want to listen to more stories like this. And if you want to leave a small declaration for yourself, drop this phrase in the comments: I choose freedom. I will see you in the next video. Thank you for listening and being here. Until next time.